Tuareg musicians. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. As we continue to talk about what's happening in Libya, the surprise entrance of rebel fighters into Tripoli. Still, there is fighting. No news on the whereabouts of the Libyan leader, Muammar Gaddafi. His 3 sons are in custody. Khaled Mattawa is with us, an acclaimed Libyan poet and scholar, speaking to us from Egypt. He's an associate professor at the University of Michigan, just returned to Cairo from weeks in Libya. And speaking of the University of Michigan, we're also joined by his colleague, Juan Cole, professor of history at the University of Michigan. He's in Ann Arbor and has been following closely the developments in Libya at juancole.com. Among his latest posts, the top 10 myths about the Libya war. Juan Cole, the significance of what we're seeing right now.
We're seeing a revolution come into its final phase. We're seeing yet another popular cascade. The reason for which the freedom fighters could enter the capital so easily, many of them just walked in or drove in and came relatively quickly to the center of the city, was because the city had already overthrown the regime. Beginning Saturday night, working-class districts rose up in the hundreds of thousands and just threw off the regime. So they softened up the situation for the fighters to come in. And we've seen this picture before. This is like what happened in Tunisia and Egypt towards the final phases of those regimes. The capital city throws hundreds of thousands of people into the downtown area to demand that the dictator depart.
Khaled Mattawa, can you talk about the significance of the sons being in custody right now and who exactly they are? Saeed al-Saif, wanted by the International Criminal Court, wanted by The Hague.
Well, I would say hi to my colleague Juan Cole in Ann Arbor, in my other hometown. I mean, I know that Saif has been in custody, and also Muhammad. I'm not sure who the 3rd son is. The differences between them, of course, is that Saif is the sort of the architect of perhaps the last 10 years. He had sort of envisioned kind of an open Libya, began to talk about an open Libya, but it was very clear through the many people that worked with him, and in fact many of the leadership of the Transitional National Council had worked with him. Mahmoud Jibril had worked with him. Mustafa Abdel Jalil was Minister of Justice when the revolution started. Abdel Hafid Roga also. All of them had worked with Saif Gaddafi to see about the possibility of introducing a constitution, of changing the government. And you know, his real name is Saif al-Islam, but people have called him Saif al-Ahlam. He's not he was the sword of dreams. He was a really an unreliable figure. He never delivered on anything. And so he, by stating so many false claims, he actually expedited the fall of his father's regime and by solidifying opposition to it. Muhammad is a businessman. He owns the 2 companies that are the cell phone companies in Libya. He owns many other businesses. He's a very rich man who capitalized on his position as his father's eldest, though he's not of the son of the wife in good standing. So he made money. He didn't get involved into politics. People may not hold a political grudge against him, but his money is ill-gotten. Saif is also a very wealthy man. He's also wanted by the International Criminal Court because he issued threats and participated directly in the policies that led to the death of people in Zawiya and other cities that his father's troops and his brother's troops that led them for fighting had killed. So he's a war criminal. Muhammad is perhaps maybe tried for enriching himself on public wealth. I'm not sure who the third son is. I hadn't heard of the third son being captured, possibly Saadi.
Saadi is the third son.
Saadi might potentially be tried for the mayhem in Benghazi, because he and Abdullah Senussi were in charge of Benghazi when the city had rebelled, and he's got the blood on his hands for what had happened there. And I think he's a military man, militarily trained man, and he may be involved in, may have been involved in some of the military action in the past 6 months. So various legal action may be taken against these men. I hope they remain safe. I hope that no vengeance is taken upon them. It's very important for Libya. What happens to these men, these Libyans, is very important to the direction of the revolution. And I hope all will keep a level head, because these men are as important for telling us what had happened, and for the people, the victorious people, demonstrating justice. That's as important as the revolution itself. We rebelled in Libya, the people did, to install justice, to establish justice. And if we cannot do it with these men, we may not be willing or able to do it for each other. So it's highly symbolic, and I hope they remain safe until they're tried. Before
we talk about the transitional government, I wanted to bring Fred Abrahams in, Special Advisor for Human Rights Watch's Program Office, just returned from Libya last Thursday. Human Rights Watch got into Libya. What did you find?
Well, the situation was very different, and events moved so quickly that we couldn't anticipate. We had two main thrusts of our research. We looked at the impact of the NATO strikes on civilians and allegations that civilians had died. And we looked at violations by the government, in particular the arrests, disappearances, torture, conditions in the prisons, this crackdown in government-held territory. And we got to visit 2 prisons. But as I say, everything's up in the air now. We never thought it would crumble so quickly.
As for the NATO bombings, what did you find?
Well, 2 points on the NATO. I mean, one is that the government clearly tried to trump up these charges and allegations. We saw signs of manipulated sites, for example, baby bottles and medicines strewn about strategically. The government claimed 1,100 civilians had died because of NATO strikes, and we just didn't find the evidence to prove that. But at the same time, there were some concerns. Definitely, in some of the sites we visited, some civilians did die. And how they died, why they died, if those were unlawful deaths in terms of laws of armed conflict, that remains to be seen. And the onus is on NATO, and that's our main point here. They should justify these attacks more than just saying it was a military target. Especially now that the conflict may be over, they can go back and say why they targeted some of these homes.
And when it came to Gaddafi's forces?
Well, the documentation on Gaddafi abuses is just extreme, widespread, intense, horrible. The crackdown in Tripoli and western parts of Libya was extreme. We don't know how many people were in the various prisons. The prison visits we had were restricted. They chose the prisoners we were talking with. They were not full visits. And I have to say something very troubling. We don't know what's happening to these prisoners now in places like Abu Slim, with the notorious political prison. How these prisoners are faring now, reports that some of them are escaping, but definite concerns about their well-being today.
You spoke with the Libyan Minister of Justice?
We met with the Minister of Justice, with the General Prosecutor, but I'll have to say something very clear. Those officials are so clearly subservient to the main force in Libya, which were the security services. And we did not have access to the Internal Security Agency, the Ministry of Interior. Look, Libya was a police state, so even the Minister of Justice would take orders over the telephone from someone high up in internal security.
Let's go to Khaled Mattawa in Cairo about who the transitional government is. Talk about the significance of the people who are in charge and what you expect to see.
The people in charge, such as Judge Mustafa Abdel, head of the Transitional National Council, Dr. Mahmoud Jibril, who's the equivalent of the Prime Minister or head of the Executive Bureau. These are people who had tried to work with the regime in the past 10 years. Mahmoud Jibril had come from the United States to work as a kind of consultant. Mustafa Abdel had been a justice minister and has a good record as a judge, was recommended by SAFE to serve in this capacity. They had been reformists. They had tried to do good from within. And now they've become statesmen. I think what they lack, and it has shown in the performance of the NTC or TNC, is a lack of real managerial power and political skill in the sense of anticipating events or managing them, particularly internally. I was in Benghazi a few weeks ago, and I thought the things internally were not being run very well, and things culminated with the assassination of Minister or the lead commander, Abdel Fattah Yunus. It was really rather traumatic to have Benghazi experience that, and it seemed like things were going to unravel. But somehow things were pulled together by the victory in the West. So the leadership is civilian, technocratic, and moderate for the most part. Mustafa Abdel is a moderate Muslim. Mahmoud Jibril is a technocrat, academician, and that's who's in the leadership. In the background, there are some Islamist leaders, such as Ali al-Salabi, who's an Islamist scholar. He may be considered a more conservative. Some people may say a kind of extremist. He's a very powerful man. The dangerous part in the eastern region of Libya had been the presence of these military forces that are really not under the full command of the national military. That would be the #1 priority, which is to unify the military, to make sure it takes orders from the council, and also to unify the security forces that are in existence so that peace and order can be in the country. The government, the NTC, is not in complete command, but it has enormous political authority and enormous ethical authority. And so I think they will ride on that until they firm up their ability to run the country, which they will need to do quite soon. But they lack some skills, but they seem to have learned quite quickly.
Professor Juan Cole, this is a piece from Reuters that begins, Libyan rebel Hussam Najer seems more concerned about the possibilities of turning on each other when they try to take control of the capital Tripoli than the threat posed by forces loyal to Muammar Gaddafi. Do you think this is a real concern?
In a post-revolutionary situation, there is always danger of faction fighting. The long knives come out to settle disputes. But I don't think that there's so far signs for extreme concern in this regard. The Transitional National Council in Benghazi clearly has liaised with the rebel forces, the dissident forces in Tripoli. It is said that the uprising was in part planned in Benghazi. There seems to be good coordination with the rebels from the or the Revolutionary Army from the Berber areas in the Western Mountain regions. There's a great deal of goodwill, desire for Libya now to go forward into more transparent government. The plan is to move to parliamentary elections within 6 to 8 months. A constitution is being drafted. And I think there's every reason to think from someone who's followed this very closely that there will be buy-in to this new national project of transparent and democratic government.